Greetings, eco-nerdlings. In this podcast, we're going to be looking at the tropical rainforest, temperate deciduous forest, and the grassland biomes. So in our last podcast, we talked about forest biomes, in particular the coniferous forests, meaning the cone-bearing forests. In this podcast, we're going to be focusing on our tropical rainforest biome, as well as our temperate deciduous forest biomes. So for a tropical rainforest, obviously they're going to have much more rain, and they're also going to have a steady higher temperature that's going to be very warm. Our temperate deciduous forests, those are the ones that are going to lose their leaves in the fall and in the winter, and they're going to have those gorgeous colors of the reds and the oranges and the yellows as they're losing their leaves. So let's get started with tropical rainforest. This is probably the type of forest you've heard about most. They are near the equator, meaning that they're very warm. They receive lots and lots of rainfall, so they have an extremely high humidity. And they also have an extremely high biodiversity, meaning there are many different types of plant life and animal life, including insects, primates, you name it, they have it. Tropical rainforests receive the greatest amount of rainfall of any other biome, and they're consistently warm. They have very few abiotic limiting factors for plant growth, meaning there's not much that prevents plants from growing. So rainforests are actually so dense with life that they're divided into 4 different layers. We have our emergent layer, which is the very top layer that you can see poking out. If you were flying a plane or something like that, that's what you could see. You would also be able to see the canopy layer right here. Underneath the canopy, we have what's called the understory. And then we also have the forest floor. Now, all of the animals that live in the different areas, they all have different niches. That allows them to coexist in the rainforest. The emergent layer and the canopy layer contain the majority of the fruit, the leaves, and the flowers of all of the different trees. They also contain most of the animal life, which includes tons and tons of different species of insects. So this is a picture right here, beautiful picture of a rainforest. This is in the Aconcagua Falls, border of Brazil, Argentina, and Bolivia. The understory only receives about 5% of the sunlight that shines onto the canopy. And the forest floor is the absolute darkest layer, and it's mostly home to decomposers like insect larvae, fungi, and also different types of bacteria. Even though decomposition occurs at a very high rate, the nutrients are reabsorbed by all of the plant light so quickly that the topsoil is actually extremely thin. So tropical rainforests, like I was saying earlier, have many different animals. So they're home to many different animals and plants, but because there's so many different layers, each animal or plant can occupy a different niche, which allows many different types of plants and animals to coexist. So next we're going to move on to temperate rainforests. These receive a little bit less rain, and they also have a little bit of a cooler temperature. They're located in coastal areas that support huge cone-bearing evergreens such as redwoods and the Douglas fir, and again they're in a cool, moist environment. So next, temperate deciduous forests. So temperate deciduous forests have moderate temperatures, they have long, warm summers, and they have cold winters, as well as lots of rain. The trees that you find here are the types that actually shed their leaves. So those are the ones that you see turning to red and orange and yellow in the fall whenever the leaves are coming off. And those types of trees include oaks, hickory, maple, and beech trees. So because winter poses a problem for the trees and the air is very dry, the trees can't really survive with all of their leaves with the lack of water and moisture. So the reason they shed their leaves is to conserve the water loss that they would have had if they had their leaves intact. So the deciduous trees adapted by shedding their leaves when the water is scarce and the ground is frozen. So in the temperate deciduous forest, we have a pretty high biodiversity, obviously not as high as the tropical rainforest, but it still has a lot of biodiversity. However, some of the adaptations that the animals have here are, one, when it starts getting colder, some of them actually hibernate. So you'll see a lot of the animals in the fall gaining weight and eating as much as they possibly can so they can burn off that fat while they sleep through the very cold months of the winter. Sometimes you'll also have animals that migrate into and out of a deciduous forest. So next we're going to move to our grasslands. If you look at the grasslands climatograph right here, we're looking at one in Wichita, Kansas. So January, February, as well as November, December have kind of low rainfall, below 10 centimeters. The rainfall and precipitation kind of kicks up in March, June, July, August. That's going to be the wet season of the grasslands. And then in the winters, we typically have temperatures right around freezing, 0 degrees Celsius right here. And then they get pretty hot in the summers. So they do receive more precipitation and cooler temperatures than the desert, and the water being less of a limiting factor allows it to have more biomass than deserts as well. So the rainfall in grasslands is, however, erratic, and fires are very, very common. It has grasses and shrubs that are good for grazing animals, and those grasses and shrubs, they regrow very quickly. So if a fire comes down and swoops everything off, they typically have really deep roots, which allows them to regrow. So even though the top of them has gotten burnt off, they can regrow very quickly, which makes them an ideal species for living in a grassland. That's also why you don't typically see a lot of trees, because trees don't recuperate as quickly as grasses do from fires. So prairie plants, like I was just saying, have adapted to the cold winter and the frequent absence of precipitation by developing those root systems, and those root systems also help if fires come through. So it enables those prairie plants to recover very quickly throughout drought and wildfire seasons, while the slow-growing trees can't really grow that quickly and recuperate from a drastic drought or from a fire. So grasslands and the chaparral biomes. In the grasslands, we don't have as much rain as you see in the different types of forest. So we do have different types of grasslands though. Our tropical grasslands right here, you're going to have a wet season that are in the cooler months, and in the months in the summer and early spring, so we have March, June, July, May, June, July, and August, you're going to have a very, very dry season. And then the temperature in the tropical grasslands stays pretty much the same throughout the year. We have little dips, but the temperature is going to remain pretty constant. In our temperate grasslands, we're going to see more rain in the summer months and in the early spring than we will in the winter, and the temperature fluctuates a little bit more. It gets colder in the winter months, and then we see the temperature spike up in the summer. The polar grasslands are going to receive lower precipitation overall, and then they're going to have a very, very low temperature, getting into the negative degrees and only getting up to about 18-20 degrees Celsius. So it's never going to get quite as hot as the tropical or the temperate grasslands. So in the savanna, the tropical and subtropical grasslands. This is warm all year round, and it has an alternating wet and dry season. And this might be something you've seen on the Discovery Channel or Animal Planet. They love talking about the savannas in Africa. And that's where you see this belt right here of all of the savannas, and that's where you'll see all of the giraffes and the hippopotami. And a lot of times they'll talk about the monsoon season, and then they go into droughts, and all of the animals are fighting over water holes and stuff like that. So that's a typical savanna. And then we have our chaparral, which is also a temperate grassland. These are found in coastal areas. The winters are pretty mild and wet, with summers being very long, hot, and dry. The chaparral also has a more moderate climate, but it has dense thickets of spiny shrubs that are subject to periodic fires. Again, you're not going to see a lot of trees here either because the fires come through so frequently. In the temperate grasslands, these have cold winters and hot, dry summers, and they have very, very deep, fertile soil. And this makes them a very ideal place for us to plant crops, as well as to grow our livestock and let them graze. So the tundra are classified as polar grasslands, and this covers about 10% of Earth's land. Most of the year, these treeless plains are very, very cold, and they have lots of ice and snow. It has a very short summer, so 6 to 8 weeks in the summer, where sunlight you can have for 24 hours a day. And then in the winters, you'll see darkness a lot of the time. In the polar grasslands, they're covered with ice and snow most of the time, aside from the very, very small summer. So you'll see a lot of animals in this region that will migrate into and out. Not a lot of animals stay there year-round. Well, I hope that was helpful. If you'd like to rewatch this video or other videos for AP Environmental Science, you can find them on my website at www.nerdlingscience.com. Well, that's all for today. This is the Queen Nerdling signing out. Stay nerdy till next time.